Well, good morning, everyone. I wanted to start off by thanking you. I know that there's a lot of conversation about one of our topics at hand, so I'll start off there with talking about Ebola. I want to make sure that all of my residents in Montgomery County understand that we are taking this very seriously and are making sure that we're following all of our protocols to ensure not only effective and safe treatment for Ms. Pham, but also making sure that we're following protocols to protect our general public as well. I just got off the phone with Dr. Alder Tillman, who is our Chief Health Officer for Montgomery County, to make sure that I confirmed any latest updates. We do still have Ms. Pham's condition listed as stable. I did want to make sure that folks understand that we are always keeping in constant contact with the CDC, NIH, our Department of Health and Human Services, as well as our Department of Homeland Security here for Montgomery County, all to ensure that we are all on the same page and doing everything we can to ensure our public safety. I'll remind folks that last week I had a conference call with the president as well as with some of his stakeholders to specifically talk about local implications when it comes to the treatment of Ebola, but also a game plan for how we would move forward. NIH has a maximum capacity of 2 people that they could actually treat within their biocontainment unit. There's been no plans, of course, obviously with no additional cases, to transport any additional folks, but they do have that capacity for an additional patient should the decision be made and if there were another case that arose to possibly be treated there. This council has been very clear that NIH represented the best place beyond some of our hospitals that are continuing to go through processes and procedures for making sure that they can properly maintain an Ebola patient. However, I will remind folks, NIH does this for a living. And so the best place for us to house a patient like this would be at our NIH campus, a place that deals with this disease and has dealt with it for many years before our most recent outbreak. And so from that perspective, we remain confident in NIH's capabilities, and we remain confident that we will be able to treat this patient and also ensure the safety of our Montgomery County residents. So with that being said, I'll move on to some of our other issues that are at hand. Many of you know that we recently talked about our Department of Liquor Control and some of the changes that are going to be made there. George Griffin, who heads up the department, certainly heard from our comptroller, who has been very spirited in terms of his opinion of where Montgomery County should go with its Department of Liquor Control. And we've also heard from constituents who've weighed in on this as well. The key is that our director certainly understands and wants to be sure that as we retool the department, that we certainly make sure that we're providing more options to folks, as well as making sure that we can continue to make sure that our department itself works efficiently and does what it needs to. I think that from a safety aspect, Montgomery County has always been one to where we've been involved in liquor control for that reason. We think that our community is safer and better off because of it. And so I think that we can address some of the challenges when it comes to product availability, as well as some of the restrictions. I think that some of the recommendations that were made by Mr. Griffin are ones in which that will continue to make sure that recommendations from the Nightlife Economy Task Force can be implemented, as well as ensuring that we continue to have, I think, the control necessary to make sure that we can keep our community safe. And so I look forward to seeing many of the things that are happening throughout. I know that as we redevelop and kind of reinvent some of our stores with upgrades and improvements, the most recent one that just happened at our Flower Avenue store. We have a brand new store that's up in Clarksburg, in our Clarksburg Village Center. So we're seeing a lot of these, and it certainly is one in which we'll be looking at doing different marketing techniques, as well as having a more kind of combined effort with the community to make sure that we're meeting the needs for providing them with that service. Lastly, I want to talk about something that many of you have heard me mention for quite a while throughout this year, something that was a priority of mine when I first joined the council as our president, but also when I first joined the council. I've been working on this for a number of years as a state legislator as well, and that's minority procurement. And I'm very happy to say that tomorrow we'll be introducing two bills, one that deals specifically with minority, female, and disabled contracting, which enables folks that are applying for county government contracts to receive a 10 to 20% increase based on the disparity for that particular contracting area of expertise, and another that deals specifically with targeting Montgomery County businesses and making sure that as they bid on county contracts, those that are dealing with companies that are outside the region and also have these priorities for their existing county contracts, that we bump them up another 10% as well. And so we've made it very clear that small business is a priority for Montgomery County, that we want to ensure that some of our minority, female, and disabled-owned businesses, ones that we've continued to struggle with how best to make sure that they can continue to grow into our future MedImmunes and Hughes Network systems, that we put our best foot forward. And that means certainly prioritizing the relationships and the support that we can give to them. And so we're also excited to have that coupled with two bills that Nancy Navarro is putting forward. And Councilmember Navarro is focusing on two different task forces to take a more in-depth look, now that we have our disparity study that's been released, to actually delve into how best we can also do this beyond these two particular bills and can continue to support minority and female and disabled-owned businesses here in the county. And so I look forward to working with my colleagues to bring both of these bills to fruition. This is an exciting time for us. I've talked to our county executive, who is in great support. So not only will we be continuing our minority, female, disabled-owned contracting program that currently exists, but we'll also be looking at expanding the reach so that we can target more of these businesses and ensure their success. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
There was never any intrepidation, fear of people being brought to an age from you or any of your colleagues?
Well, of course, there's always a fear associated with a disease that's as deadly as Ebola. But I've always felt, and many of my colleagues always felt, that the proper place for that would be NIH, a place that has one of the few in the nation biocontainment units that really is specifically designed for this particular purpose. I think the trepidation always comes about when you're dealing with, say, a brand new hospital with new folks there that haven't gone through this process and procedure before. And so that's where some of those missteps could potentially happen. We don't see that with NIH, and so we feel very comfortable and confident that NIH is the best place for this patient to be if they were coming to the Montgomery County area. And so we're very happy to see that person that was placed there.
Dr. Tillman last week said something comparing Ebola to flu. Can they talk about that?
Sure.
Flu's more.
That's right. Well, the reality is that we'll have more people that will die from influenza than we will from Ebola, especially here in the United States. And so from that perspective, we certainly want people to be aware. Part of the concern and the tie is that flu symptoms are similar to the beginning symptoms of Ebola, so we don't want people to panic. Keep in mind, if you haven't had any contact with a person or been in a country in some of the African regions, then this is not something that just would miraculously just appear. And so from that perspective, we want to caution the public and make sure that they don't go into what we're now calling the Ebola fear. But it certainly is something that, we just want to make sure that folks are well advised of. And we also want to encourage people to go out and get their flu shots, because that is extremely important, especially for our most vulnerable populations, and that is our elderly as well as children. And so we want that message to be heard loud and clear.
In a worst case scenario, if there should be another case of Ebola or 2 cases of Ebola in this area, what other, you say no other hospital besides NIH? There's only 1 other bed. Is there another place in the metropolitan area where Ebola can be safely treated?
Well, just like Ms. Pham was transported, and let me be clear, when I say safely treated, again, there are a number of places in which you could potentially treat someone safely. The key is following the protocols, making sure that the equipment is there and necessary for you. And all hospitals have containment units. They're just not as advanced as the one that we find at NIH. So if, for example, there were a number of other patients who contracted Ebola, there are a number of other facilities throughout the nation that also have biocontainment units. One is in Atlanta, and there are a few others throughout the United States. And so they would be transported just as Ms. Pham was transported here to one of those other facilities. And I think that would be and is the best course of action for us at this point to ensure the safety of our greater population and to stave off the potential for there being a risk of increased exposure.
Are you receiving any emails, letters, phone calls from constituents with questions about what's happened here?
Absolutely, and it's the reason why we actually set up a website for folks to have questions answered and to know what's going on. That website is www.montgomerycountymd.gov/Ebola. And it's also on the council's homepage. It's one of the ones that runs at the very beginning. You can just click on that link and be transported to get all kinds of facts and information about how you can contract Ebola, what the symptoms are and signs are, what the most recent information from the CDC is regarding Ebola. All of those kinds of things are there and information. And of course, it's more about questions. People are just expressing concern and just making sure that they have nothing to be worried about. And our message is there's nothing to be worried about. Ms. Pham is in one of the best places in the nation, let alone the world, for treatment. And we continue to make sure that the safety of our constituents is a priority.
And have you asked NIH for constant communication on what's happening there?
They have been in constant communication with us as well as with our Department of Health and Human Services, with our Chief Health Officer, Dr. Tillman, also with our Department of Homeland Security for Montgomery County. So we've all been in constant contact just to make sure that we're readily updated when it comes to any kinds of concerns that we might need to have future plans. But of course, obviously, at this point, there are none that currently exist. But future capacity needs, should they be available, again, with the additional bed that's there in NIH. So we're all well-versed in terms of what's going on.
Craig, the minority business bill got held a week, and now there are several others that I believe at least one that you've introduced that I believe goes hand in hand with that. What's kind of going on here and the motivation?
Well, I think the message is that together we're putting these bills all together to show where Montgomery County is when it comes to its commitment to our small businesses, especially those that we've seen continue to unfortunately have a disparity when it comes to garnering county contracts. And so from that perspective, we're trying to do our best from a number of different fronts. And so obviously the program that we continue to have is one that we'll continue to support. But at the same time, we also want to start thinking a little bit outside of the box about how we can do things a little bit differently. And that speaks to 2 of the bills that I have, but it also speaks to Councilmember Navarro's bills that specifically have a task force that will start to think about other ways in which we can continue to grow our minority, female, and disabled-owned presence when it comes to acquiring county contracts as well. And so I think they all dovetail very strongly together. It's something that again, I said at the beginning of this year was going to be a priority focus of mine, and I'm happy to approach the end of my presidency with closing out strong and seeing these bills come to fruition, and hope that my colleagues will be supportive as we move these forward.
Do you anticipate the sunset bill will continue to move forward, or will you hold that to go along with these bills?
They're actually going to move at the same time, so they'll all be moving together.
Okay, because I know these are introduced, so will you have the vote tomorrow on the sunset, or are you going to defer that?
I'm not sure about the vote on this one, but I think so. I think so. So it'll be a vote on this one, but then also introduction of the other bills as well. That's right.
Right. And are these the bills that you mentioned it's been a priority of, your presidency?
Right.
Are these bills you've been working on throughout the year? I mean,
We have, and we've been making sure. Again, we had to wait for our disparity study to come out. That was the premise, because without that, you really can't move forward with any kind of disparity bills. And so we wanted to see what the numbers look like first before we decided to shape what the bill would have in terms of its detail. Now that we've seen that, it's given us the ability to tie those two in together. So it's perfect timing, actually.
Early voting starts Thursday. Are you planning to vote early?
Absolutely. I'll be voting on the first day of early voting. That's one of the things that I did want to close with. So thank you very much, Sonia. We have a big election ahead of us, and I think that it's extremely important for Montgomery County residents especially. Many of us in this county have been very adamant about the fact that Montgomery County, being the largest jurisdiction, one of those that leads the state when it comes to a lot of our innovation, economic development, but also needs. And Montgomery County has very great transportation as well as education needs, and we need to have a governor that continues to support that. And so, we want to make sure that our residents are looking very closely at who is going to be supportive and who's going to be a partner for Montgomery County in the future. I think that that's going to help shape and solidify Montgomery County as a leader in this great state and also in this nation. And so from that perspective, we encourage all of our residents to make sure that they exercise their right to vote. Whether it's the 23rd through the 30th or on November 4th, we want to make sure that our turnout is increased. And we need to make sure that Montgomery County's voice is heard at the ballot box.
So do you think there's going to be an increase since Montgomery County had one of the lowest voter turnouts last time?
It's unfortunate, and we've been attending numerous voter rallies. We had a number of voter rallies this weekend, and we continue to do that. We continue to make sure that all of the events that we go to, we stress the importance of going out to vote. We've been running it on all of our websites as well as individually on our Twitter feeds as well as Facebook pages. We're really trying to drum up the support and make sure that folks understand that just because this isn't a presidential election, it's still a very important election for the residents of Montgomery County. And so it is our hope that we'll actually see that number increase.
will we see any public information type campaign or outreach from the county to drive voter participation?
We have been, and we've been running that throughout our pages. And
Ramp up though, like here at the end?
you will see some of that over the next couple days as we start to approach the early voting time frame, and then leading up until general election day as well. So you'll see that continue to increase through all of our presence on our social media outlets as well.
And I assume with the the task force report on the right to vote that the county council is now looking at, you're going to be looking really closely at the turnout from this general election?
Absolutely. It will be very indicative to us in terms of what recommendations we might need to implement to ensure that we're reaching the most people and getting the majority of our constituency involved.
So what do you say to people who may feel like the election's already won and they don't need to vote? Like, what do you say to those people?
Well, again, our message is very clear. When you exercise your right to vote, you've actually given a clear indication of the direction that you want your county to go in. And so I think that from that perspective, we have stressed how important it is. You can't complain about something after it's already done. So let's make sure that your voice is heard at the ballot box, that your priorities are heard and met, This is a great opportunity to outreach to your current elected officials as well as those that are running for office and tell them about what you care about what's important to you. That's the only way that this democracy works. It works in conjunction with people giving ideas, talking about what's important to their community. It's the reason why I've held a number of community forums leading up to this, because it was important for me as an elected official to hear from my constituency about what's important to them. Those are the things that continue to happen. I think with my colleagues as well, we need to stress this and make sure that as we move forward, that nothing's ever taken for granted. We saw that in Virginia. And folks should not rest on their laurels and think that just because we have a majority of Democrats that's going to be the case. We've seen in some of the endorsements that have come out, that they've run the gamut, that you've seen some on both sides. And so you see people actively working and engaged, and I think that our public needs to see that, know that there is an election and your voice needs to be heard. And so that's the ultimate message at the end of the day.
Craig, forgive me if you already talked about this, but tomorrow night there's 2 public hearings on the CCOC bills that George has put out there. These are pretty complicated and rather misunderstood bills, as I'm seeing in the comments coming into my inbox. What can you tell people that they need to know about these bills?
Well, I think overall, it's more that we'd like to hear from them. We don't want to tell people what to think or what their opinions should be. We'd like to hear from them, and it's again, our public hearings are a great opportunity for us to hear from the public. And so, I don't want to put out any message at this point beyond the fact that especially before a public hearing, that we want to hear from you about what your thoughts are and take it from there.
One of the questions on election day is the first question on the transportation lockbox. You're a former legislator, so one, do you support the amendment? And 2, does it make it any more difficult? I know that things can still ring, that they can still go in and raid that money. Does it make it any more difficult?
It does. So let me answer the first question first. Yes, I do indeed support it. I've actually talked at my community forums about making sure that because transportation is such an important priority for Montgomery County, that folks support it. And so I've been actively campaigning for that amendment. Secondly, of course, as you know, you've done and you've followed this for a long time. The reality is that could you still get around? You certainly could, but it does make it harder. It does make it an additional step. And so from that perspective, I think it's the right thing for us to do. And hopefully we'll continue to ensure that we have transportation funding that is somewhat predictable and continues to ramp up over the next years. But I will say this, it's also coupled with a gubernatorial candidate who supports and feels that mass transit options as well as roads are important for this region. And so I can't stress that enough, that those kinds of things are important. Montgomery County has led our transportation priority letters with 2 projects, the Purple Line and the CCT. That's what we've heard from our constituents, our residents, that are priorities for them. And so those matter to us when it comes to elected officials and should matter to our voters when it comes to who they choose on November 4th or October 23rd through the 30th.
You said you think, back to alcohol sales, that the community is safer and better off because the county is involved in managing alcohol sales. Safer, is that crime that you're talking about? And can you compare Montgomery County's crime?
Not necessarily crime, but more in terms of, and I guess technically it is a crime, but when it comes to underage alcohol sales and the stings that we're able to do, all of the things that go into really managing, right? And so I don't know if control is necessarily the right word. I think management is more appropriate. We manage our alcohol sales here in Montgomery County and do a good job of making sure that we're not overrunning neighborhoods, that we're not participating in when it comes to illegal alcohol sales. It's those kinds of factors that I'm talking about. Education campaigns and being a great partner in terms of utilizing some of the profits from those alcohol sales to go into education campaigns about the dangers of underage or abuse of alcohol. Those are the kinds of things that we have an established relationship with our DLC to where with a private entity that necessarily wouldn't be the case. There would be no mandate for that. And so from that perspective, I think we are better off. I think that we, again, have to work on some of the marketing aspects, some of the inventory availability, and we're continuing to do that through some of the recommendations that have been put forth by Mr. Griffin. And so I think we can get to a place to where folks still feel comfortable with being able to access the varieties that they want to see, whether you're an individual or a restaurant, but then also keeping in mind the community safety aspects that go along with having a partner like an agency like the DLC.
So is there a fear that the state could force the county to privatize alcohol, kind of like what they did on the Eastern Shore?
I don't think that would be the case. Just in terms of, and I know where the comptroller is, but I don't see that from the spirit from the General Assembly. I've talked with Charlie Barkley, who's one of our representatives who also heads up the subcommittee in Annapolis. And so our conversations have been that there's nothing like that in the works, and I don't think that's the direction for us. I think that, again, what we want to do is make sure that this is working for everybody, making sure that we're working in the sense of providing the needs, especially for our restaurants and bars, and then also for some individuals who might have more eclectic tastes. And so trying to meet the needs of that as much as possible, but also no one can argue with the safety aspect and the partnership that we can continue to have. And so from that perspective, I don't see anybody usurping our power when it comes to that. I think that would be something we would have to seek from the General Assembly if we were to go that direction.
Isn't this also about money, though? Don't we get several, quite a lot of money out of alcohol sales going into?
We do, but in the course of, and again, I don't want to toot our own horn by saying, we're Montgomery County, but I mean, you're talking about a $5 billion budget. And so, in reality, look, sure, we make some profit that comes to the county when it comes to alcohol and liquor sales, but the reality is this isn't about money. This is really about making sure that we have a well-managed program that works well for our constituency, whether it's individuals and it comes to safety, or whether it's our bars and restaurants and individuals who want to partake and consume alcohol in a safe manner. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
Have there been any comparative studies? Have we looked at ourselves compared to other jurisdictions? Are we really safer because we have this program that no other county in the state has?
When it comes to underage sales and some of the other things, I think that our numbers are significantly lower than surrounding jurisdictions. That is definitely true. And so from that perspective alone, I mean, those are the kinds of things that we look at when it comes to ensuring that this program's working. If you just solely look at it from a monetary perspective or from the availability of variety, we might lag behind some other jurisdictions, but I'd certainly always want to err on the side of safety in those sorts of situations. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. I look forward to talking to you next week. We should have some more information. Thanks.